Welcome to Some TV Movie Channel, your home for amazing movies and non-stop entertainment. Get ready to enjoy blockbuster hits, timeless classics, and exciting stories from every genre. Whether you love action, drama, comedy, or adventure, there's always something to watch here. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest uploads. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the movie experience with Some TV Movie Channel. The story begins with Henry Hill looking back on his childhood in a working-class neighborhood of New York. Unlike the ordinary people around him, Henry becomes fascinated by the local gangsters who seem to control everything on the streets. They drive expensive cars, wear stylish clothes, carry themselves with confidence, and appear to have access to everything an ordinary person could only dream of. To Henry, they aren't frightening criminals. Instead, they seem like powerful men who live freely, untouched by the rules that control everyone else. Henry's fascination grows stronger with each passing day. He watches the neighborhood gangsters closely and starts dreaming about becoming one of them. His parents want him to concentrate on school and build a respectable future, but Henry imagines something completely different. He doesn't want to spend his life working an ordinary job and waiting for small opportunities. He wants money, respect, influence, and the excitement that seems to surround the men he admires. Eventually, Henry begins doing small jobs for local gangsters. At first, the work seems harmless. He runs errands, delivers messages, and handles minor tasks. But these simple responsibilities gradually introduce him to a world where loyalty is valued above almost everything else. The gangsters quickly realize that Henry is dependable, quiet, and willing to follow instructions. Rather than treating him like an ordinary kid, they begin giving him more opportunities and slowly bring him deeper into their world. Henry soon discovers that the criminal world operates by its own set of rules. The men around him have connections throughout the neighborhood and seem capable of solving problems that would terrify ordinary people. If someone refuses to cooperate, there are ways to pressure them. If money is needed, illegal businesses can provide it. And if the police become suspicious, the gangsters know how to protect themselves. Henry is fascinated by this hidden world because, for the first time, it gives him a sense of importance and power that he has never experienced before. As Henry becomes more deeply involved, he meets several people who will have a major influence on his future. One of them is Jimmy Conway, an experienced criminal known for his intelligence, confidence, and ability to organize major schemes. Jimmy treats Henry with respect and recognizes his potential. Henry looks up to him and begins learning how serious criminal operations are planned and carried out. Then there is Tommy DeVito, whose personality is completely different from Jimmy's. Tommy can be charming and funny one moment, but the next, he can become extremely dangerous if he feels disrespected. His unpredictable temper makes people nervous, yet Henry is still drawn into his circle. The three men gradually become close, and their friendship becomes one of the most important relationships in Henry's life. Henry doesn't see Jimmy and Tommy as ordinary criminals. To him, they represent the lifestyle he has always dreamed about. They have money, connections, influence, and a sense of freedom from many of the rules that control ordinary people's lives. Henry begins to believe that he has finally found the life he was meant to live. The deeper he gets into this world, the harder it becomes for him to imagine returning to an ordinary life. His criminal activities become increasingly serious, and the rewards grow larger. Henry starts making far more money than his family could ever have imagined. He can afford better clothes, better food, and a lifestyle that makes people take notice. The respect he receives from the neighborhood only strengthens his belief that he has made the right choice. Every successful job convinces him that the criminal world is giving him everything he has ever wanted. But Henry still does not understand the true cost of that lifestyle. The people around him are not ordinary friends. Their loyalty can disappear the moment money or survival is at stake. Their world is built on secrecy, fear, and constant suspicion. Someone can be treated like family one day and become an enemy the next. Henry is still young enough to believe that friendship and loyalty will protect him, but the world he has entered does not forgive mistakes easily. As he continues to rise, Henry becomes more comfortable with the criminal lifestyle. Things that once seemed shocking slowly become normal. Illegal deals, stolen goods, threats, and criminal schemes become part of his daily routine. Henry no longer sees himself as someone who is simply helping gangsters. He begins to see himself as one of them. His childhood dream is finally becoming a reality. But behind the expensive clothes, money, and excitement lies a dangerous truth that Henry has yet to fully understand. The higher he rises in this world, the more he has to lose. Soon, the friendships that made him feel powerful will begin to test what loyalty truly means. Henry Hill's involvement in the criminal world continues to grow. What once began as a series of small neighborhood jobs gradually becomes a lifestyle that completely changes his future. He becomes more confident around the gangsters and starts to understand how their operations work. The older criminals recognize that Henry is useful because he is young, observant, and willing to learn. He knows when to speak and, perhaps more importantly, when to stay silent. Every new assignment gives him another connection, another source of income, and another reason to stay away from the ordinary life his parents want for him. Henry's parents begin to notice that something is changing. He suddenly has more money than someone his age should have, and he spends more and more time away from home. His family does not understand where the money is coming from, but Henry becomes skilled at avoiding their questions. He starts making excuses for his activities and learns that secrecy is essential if he wants to remain involved in the criminal world. The more successful Henry becomes, the farther he moves from the normal life his parents imagined for him. As he becomes more established, his friendship with Jimmy Conway becomes increasingly important. Jimmy is not simply a criminal who knows how to make money. He understands people and knows how to organize complicated operations. He has a reputation for being ambitious, intelligent, and extremely careful when planning his moves. Henry admires Jimmy because he seems to have mastered the world Henry always dreamed of entering. Jimmy also recognizes Henry's potential and begins trusting him with more serious responsibilities. Tommy DeVito remains another major influence on Henry. Tommy is entertaining, confident, and unpredictable, making him both fascinating and dangerous. He can make everyone around him laugh, but his temper can change the atmosphere in an instant. Henry quickly learns that Tommy is someone who should never be taken lightly. Even when Tommy is joking, there is always a feeling that something could go wrong if someone says the wrong thing or challenges his pride. The three men gradually become a close-knit group. Henry, Jimmy, and Tommy spend more time together, and their criminal activities bring them even closer. They begin making money through increasingly ambitious schemes, and Henry becomes comfortable with the idea that this is simply how his life is going to be. He no longer dreams about becoming a gangster someday. In his mind, he has already become one. Money begins transforming Henry's lifestyle. He can afford expensive clothes, fine meals, and a level of comfort that would have been impossible for his family. He enjoys being recognized and treated with respect. Restaurants, clubs, and other exclusive places become part of his world, and Henry starts enjoying the privileges that come with having powerful connections. People who once ignored him now want to be around him because they know he has access to money and influence. But Henry also begins to understand that this lifestyle comes with constant pressure. The gangsters may appear relaxed while enjoying themselves, but they are always aware of who is watching them. Police attention is always a possibility, and rival criminals can create problems without warning. Henry knows that one mistake could put everything he has built at risk. Instead of making him cautious enough to walk away, however, the danger makes the lifestyle even more exciting. As the years pass, Henry becomes increasingly involved in organized crime. He learns how to move between different groups and maintain relationships that help him make money. The criminal world that once seemed like a distant dream has now become the center of his life. And Henry is becoming more deeply trapped in it with every step. Henry's confidence continues to grow, and he starts believing that the people around him will always protect one another. Loyalty is one of the most important rules in their world. Friends are expected to stand together, keep each other's secrets, and never cooperate with outsiders. Henry accepts these rules without stopping to consider what could happen if someone ever breaks them. Meanwhile, Jimmy's ambitions continue to expand. He is always searching for new ways to make money, and Henry has become one of the people he trusts enough to include in his plans. Tommy also wants to move higher in the criminal world, but his impulsive nature often creates problems that could easily have been avoided. Henry frequently finds himself caught between Jimmy's careful planning and Tommy's unpredictable personality. He enjoys being part of both men's circles, but he does not yet realize how dangerous their differences could eventually become. Henry's reputation is also beginning to spread beyond his immediate neighborhood. He is no longer just the kid who once ran errands for local gangsters. He is becoming a respected member of a much larger criminal network. The money is better, the opportunities are greater, and the consequences are far more serious. For Henry, it feels as though he has finally escaped the ordinary life he always hated. But there is another side to his growing success. The higher he rises, the more attention he attracts. His sudden wealth makes people curious, while his expanding connections make him increasingly visible. The authorities may not know everything he is doing, but they are certainly not completely unaware of the criminal activity surrounding him. Henry's growing confidence sometimes makes him forget just how closely his world is being watched. Even so, he believes he has everything under control. Jimmy is beside him, Tommy is beside him, money is filling his pockets, and his reputation on the streets continues to grow. The childhood dream he once imagined seems to have finally become reality. But the world Henry has chosen is built on temporary alliances, hidden motives, and dangerous decisions. The friendships he trusts so completely will eventually be tested. When that happens, Henry will learn that being part of the gang does not guarantee safety. For now, however, the money keeps coming and the parties continue. Henry becomes more deeply involved in the lifestyle he once admired from a distance. His life moves further and further away from the ordinary world, and the more successful he becomes, the deeper he sinks into the criminal life. What once felt like an exciting secret existence is now becoming his entire identity. Henry knows how to talk to people, move money, keep information hidden, and make himself useful to the men who control the neighborhood. He is no longer simply following older gangsters around. He has built a reputation of his own, and people are beginning to treat him with the respect he always wanted. The money gives Henry freedom, while his connections give him confidence. To him, this is the life he dreamed about as a child, and he sees very little reason to question it. As his involvement grows, he begins enjoying privileges that ordinary people can only imagine. He can walk into places where others have to wait, receive special treatment because of his connections, and spend money without constantly worrying about his next paycheck. Restaurants, clubs, expensive clothes, and a non-stop social life become normal parts of Henry's routine. He enjoys feeling important, especially because he remembers what it was like to be a kid watching these men from a distance. Now, he has become one of the people others watch. That transformation gives him a powerful sense of accomplishment. Even though his success is built entirely on crime, Henry's friendship with Jimmy Conway becomes stronger during this period. Jimmy is older and more experienced, and Henry respects the way he always seems to think several steps ahead. Jimmy understands that criminal operations require planning, patience, and trust. He knows how to recognize opportunities and organize people without attracting unnecessary attention. Henry learns a great deal simply by watching him. Jimmy also sees Henry as someone dependable, and that trust allows Henry to become involved in larger and more profitable activities. Their relationship gradually begins to resemble that of close partners, with Henry relying more and more on Jimmy's experience. Tommy DeVito brings a completely different energy to the group. He is confident, funny, and capable of making everyone around him feel comfortable. But beneath that charm is an unpredictable side that can never be ignored. Tommy's temper can turn an innocent conversation into a serious confrontation within seconds. Henry sees this behavior but continues spending time with Tommy because he is part of the world Henry has chosen. In a strange way, the three men balance one another. Jimmy is calculating, Tommy is explosive, and Henry is learning how to navigate between them. Their friendship becomes one of the most important parts of Henry's life. But the differences in their personalities will eventually lead to serious consequences. Henry also begins to realize just how important reputation is in their world. A gangster's reputation can open doors, command fear, and protect him from people who might otherwise try to take advantage of him. But that same reputation can become dangerous when someone feels insulted or believes they have been disrespected. Henry watches how quickly minor disagreements can turn into serious problems, and he learns that people in this world take pride very seriously. Although he is not as unpredictable as Tommy, Henry understands that he must always be careful about what he says and who he says it to. At home, Henry's double life becomes increasingly difficult to conceal. His family can see that he has money, but they have no idea exactly how he is earning it. Henry becomes skilled at coming up with explanations that sound convincing enough to end uncomfortable questions. The people closest to him may suspect that something is wrong, but the rewards of his lifestyle make him unwilling to walk away. He feels that the criminal world has given him everything that ordinary life never could. Instead of treating the danger as a warning, Henry begins to see it as simply another price of success. As his involvement grows, so does his confidence in his ability to avoid the consequences. He believes that knowing the right people will protect him from serious trouble. If something goes wrong, there is always someone who can help, make a phone call, or know exactly how to handle the situation. This belief becomes one of Henry's greatest weaknesses because it gives him a dangerous sense of security. He starts believing that the rules that apply to ordinary people do not necessarily apply to him. Meanwhile, Jimmy continues looking for bigger opportunities. Small criminal operations are no longer enough for men who have become accustomed to making large amounts of money. Henry becomes increasingly involved in these schemes, and as the rewards grow, so do the risks. The excitement is difficult for him to resist. Every successful operation strengthens his belief that he has chosen the right path. He sees the money and freedom, but he still does not fully understand how many people are waiting for the right opportunity to bring him down. Tommy's behavior also becomes increasingly troubling. His temper and willingness to act without thinking create situations that could attract unwanted attention. Jimmy sometimes tries to keep him under control, but Tommy is not someone who easily accepts limits. Henry begins to understand that working with dangerous people means accepting risks that he cannot always predict. Someone can be loyal one day and reckless the next, and a single impulsive decision can put everyone around them in danger. Despite all these warning signs, Henry continues to enjoy his position. He becomes more comfortable around powerful criminals and starts believing that he truly belongs among them. The excitement of this lifestyle makes ordinary life seem dull by comparison. He no longer wants to return to school, regular work, or the expectations of his family. The streets have become his real education, and the gangsters around him have become his teachers. Henry's growing confidence eventually puts him in situations where he must prove that he can handle greater responsibility. He begins taking on more serious jobs and dealing with people who are far more experienced than he is. These opportunities bring him more money, but they also move him closer to the most dangerous side of organized crime. Henry knows that he is moving upward, but he does not yet understand that rising higher also means becoming more visible. The criminal world begins to feel like a private society with its own rules, rewards, and punishments. Henry enjoys the sense of belonging because he has spent his entire life wanting to be part of something like this. The men around him treat him as one of their own, and that acceptance becomes more valuable to him than almost anything else. He believes their loyalty will last, especially because they have shared money, secrets, and dangerous situations together. But Henry is slowly learning that loyalty in this world has limits. Jimmy's ambition continues to grow, Tommy's temper becomes increasingly difficult to control, and Henry himself becomes more deeply involved than ever before. Every new success makes it harder for him to imagine walking away. The lifestyle has given him almost everything he ever wanted, but it has also created a good world where every friendship can carry a hidden danger. And as Henry's world continues to expand, another important part of his life is about to enter the picture with someone who will become deeply connected to both his personal life and his dangerous criminal world. Henry believes he is finally living the dream. He does not yet realize how quickly his dream life can turn into a nightmare. Henry Hill's criminal career continues to expand, but his personal life is about to change in ways he never expected. As his reputation grows, Henry begins moving among different circles and spending more time in restaurants, clubs, and other places where his criminal connections earn him special treatment. He enjoys the attention, the respect, and the sense of importance that comes with his growing status. But beneath that confidence is still a young man desperate to prove that he belongs in a world that was once completely beyond his reach. He now has money, friends, and influence, but his life is becoming increasingly complicated. The line between his criminal activities and his personal relationships is beginning to disappear. During this period, Henry meets Karen, a young woman who is quickly drawn into his unusual lifestyle. At first, Karen does not fully understand what Henry does or why so many people seem to know him. She simply notices that he is confident, generous, and capable of making things happen in ways ordinary people cannot. Henry takes her to places where they receive special treatment and introduces her to a world of expensive dinners, nightlife, and constant excitement. To Karen, Henry seems mysterious and different from the other men she knows. His confidence attracts her, even though there are clear signs that something about his life is far from normal. Henry becomes increasingly interested in Karen, and their relationship develops quickly. He enjoys being with her because she represents something outside the criminal world while still being fascinated by the lifestyle he has created. Henry wants Karen to see the best parts of his life via the money, confidence, friendships, and freedom that make him feel as though ordinary rules do not apply to him. He does not immediately reveal every dangerous detail of his activities. Instead, he lets Karen discover his world gradually, almost as though he wants her to become comfortable with it before she understands what lies beneath the surface. Karen soon realizes that Henry's friends are very different from ordinary people. Jimmy Conway carries himself like someone who is constantly calculating his next move, while Tommy DeVito can shift from charming to threatening without warning. Henry, however, seems completely comfortable around them. Still, Karen senses that something dangerous exists beneath their jokes and friendly conversations. She gradually understands that the people Henry spends his time with are involved in serious criminal activities. Yet rather than immediately walking away, her curiosity and feelings for Henry continue pulling her deeper into his world. Henry's relationship with Karen becomes more serious, and eventually they build a life together. But being close to Henry means Karen can never remain completely separate from his criminal activities. She begins witnessing things that would frighten ordinary people and starts understanding why Henry is constantly surrounded by secrecy. His world is filled with people who can make problems disappear, but it is also filled with people who can create terrible problems in an instant. Karen learns that being Henry's wife means living with the knowledge that his enemies, associates, and criminal decisions can affect her life as well. Henry continues working with Jimmy and Tommy while trying to maintain his personal life. His criminal activities become more profitable, and the money allows him to provide Karen with an increasingly comfortable lifestyle. He enjoys giving her things that most people could never afford, and he convinces himself that this proves his choices have been worthwhile. Karen may have concerns about where the money comes from, but Henry's ability to make their lives comfortable makes it difficult for her to completely reject his world. As Henry's influence grows, he becomes more confident about taking risks. He knows how to deal with criminals, keep information away from outsiders, and use his connections to solve problems. But that confidence slowly begins turning into carelessness. Henry becomes so accustomed to getting what he wants that he starts believing he can control every situation. He fails to appreciate how quickly circumstances can change in the criminal world. Jimmy remains one of Henry's closest partners, and the two continue searching for new ways to make money. Jimmy is always thinking about the next opportunity, and Henry is eager to take part. Their friendship is built on years of shared experiences, but there is also an unspoken understanding that money always comes first. Henry trusts Jimmy, yet the criminal world has taught him that trust must always be balanced with caution. Tommy's behavior becomes increasingly dangerous during this period. His temper makes him unpredictable, and his constant need to prove himself creates unnecessary tension. Henry enjoys Tommy's friendship, but he understands that Tommy's actions could eventually bring serious consequences for everyone around him. Jimmy sometimes tries to keep the situation under control, but Tommy's volatile personality makes that increasingly difficult. Henry finds himself watching Tommy more carefully, knowing that one reckless decision could attract the attention of our law enforcement or anger powerful people. Meanwhile, Henry's life with the Karen continues to grow. She becomes more familiar with the people around him and gradually understands that his money is connected to a world where violence and fear are normal. Henry tries to reassure her that everything is under control, but the reality is becoming harder to hide. Karen begins seeing the contradictions in his life. Henry can be affectionate and generous at home, yet he spends his days surrounded by people capable of doing terrible things without a hesitation. The more Karen learns, the more she realizes that Henry's lifestyle is not simply glamorous. The expensive clothes, restaurants, and money are on the one side of it. Behind them are secrets, betrayals, dangerous enemies, and the constant possibility of arrest. Henry has become so accustomed to this world that he barely notices the danger anymore. But Karen is beginning to see it clearly. Even so, Henry continues believing that he can have both worlds. He wants the respect and money of the criminal life while also building a stable family with Karen. He does not yet understand that those two worlds will eventually collide. Every criminal decision he makes creates consequences that can follow him home, and every secret he keeps from Karen creates another crack in their relationship. At the same time, Henry's position within the criminal organization continues becoming more complicated. He is trusted with larger responsibilities. Due to greater responsibility also means a greater exposure. The authorities are becoming increasingly interested in our criminal activity in the area, and Henry's name is slowly becoming part of a world that law enforcement is watching carefully. He still believes his connections will protect him, but the pressure around him is beginning to increase. For now, Henry continues living the life he once dreamed about. He has Karen beside him, Jimmy and Tommy around him, money in his pocket, and a reputation that gives him confidence. Everything appears to be moving in the direction he wants. But the criminal world does not remain peaceful for long. The friendships that once seemed unbreakable will soon face serious tests, and Henry will discover that the people closest to him can become just as dangerous as his enemies. Henry Hill's life now appears to be exactly what he always wanted. He has money, a family, powerful friends, and a reputation that opens music doors wherever he goes. But the deeper he becomes involved in organized crime, the more complicated everything around him becomes. His relationship with Karen has brought a new dimension to his life. Yet, even at home, he cannot completely escape the criminal world. The people he works with are always nearby, and the money supporting his lifestyle comes from activities that could destroy everything if the authorities ever put the pieces together. Henry continues convincing himself that he can keep his personal life separate from his criminal life, but that separation is becoming music harder every day. Henry's confidence also grows as he becomes more trusted by Jimmy and the other criminals around them. He's no longer treated like a young man who needs to prove himself. He has earned his place, and his connections will allow him to move through the criminal world with increasing freedom. He knows who to call when something goes wrong, where to go when he needs help, and how to make money through different illegal operations. The lifestyle has become so normal to him that he rarely stops to think about how extraordinary and dangerous it really is. What once frightened him now feels like an ordinary part of his daily routine. Jimmy Conway continues looking for opportunities that can bring in large amounts of money. His ambition never seems to slow down, and Henry is eager to be involved whenever Jimmy finds a profitable opportunity. Jimmy has a natural ability to organize people and keep everyone focused on the money, but his ambition also makes him increasingly dangerous. He does not like losing, and he does not tolerate people who interfere with his plans. Henry respects Jimmy's intelligence, but he is beginning to understand that there is a darker side to his friend's personality that should never be underestimated. Tommy DeVito, meanwhile, continues creating tension through his unpredictable behavior. He wants respect and becomes easily offended when he feels that someone nice challenging him. Henry has learned to laugh along with Tommy and avoid pushing his temper too far, but there are moments when even Henry becomes uncomfortable. Tommy's impulsive nature is becoming a growing problem because the criminal world depends on people knowing when to remain calm. Jimmy understands the danger, but Tommy does not always recognize the consequences of his actions until it is too late. Henry's growing confidence leads him into increasingly serious criminal music activities. The money becomes larger, and so do the risks. Every successful operation makes Henry feel more secure, but each new connection also creates another persona who knows something about him. The more people involved, the more difficult it becomes to keep everything secret. Henry does not think about this carefully enough because the rewards are immediate while the consequences seem distant. Karen begins noticing that Henry's behavior is changing as well. He is often away from home, sometimes disappears without giving a clearer explanation, and becomes increasingly protective of his private activities. She knows that his money, music, comes from illegal sources, but she does not always know exactly what he is involved in. The uncertainty creates tension between them. Karen loves Henry, but she also realizes that loving him means accepting a lifestyle filled with risks that she never expected when their relationship began. Henry tries to reassure her that everything is fine. He wants Karen to believe that his connections make him safe, and for a while, she accepts that explanation. After all, Henry seems successful and confident, and their life appears comfortable from the outside. But behind the scenes, Henry's world is becoming increasingly unstable. The people around him are taking bigger risks. Law enforcement is becoming more active, and the possibility of betrayal is always present. The criminal organization around Henry operates on a strict understanding of loyalty. But Henry slowly discovers that loyalty has limits. People are loyal when money is flowing and everyone, music, is benefiting. When someone becomes our problem, however, attitudes can change quickly. Henry watches how people who were once treated as friends can suddenly become targets of suspicion. These moments should make him reconsider the life he has chosen, but instead they convince him to become even more careful. One of the biggest changes in Henry's life is the growing pressure from law enforcement. The authorities are becoming increasingly interested in other criminal activities surrounding him. Henry starts noticing signs that he might be watched more closely than before. He tries to stay calm and continues his usual routine, but the possibility of being arrested begins entering his mind more often. For someone who has always believed that connections, music, can't solve every problem, the idea of facing the law is deeply uncomfortable. Jimmy, however, remains focused on making money. He does not want fear to interfere with the business, and Henry follows his lead. The two continue working together, believing that they can stay ahead of the authorities. Tommy remains involved as well, but his unpredictable behavior makes the situation more complicated. Henry is beginning to realize that he cannot control everything his friends do. He may be careful himself, but someone else's mistake could still bring consequences down on all of them. Henry's personal life becomes even more complicated as Karen becomes increasingly aware of the dangers surrounding them. She starts understanding that the men Henry calls his friends are not simply businessmen with questionable habits. They are criminals whose decisions can affect everyone around them. The glamour she once saw in Henry's lifestyle begins losing some of its shine. Money and luxury are still there, but now she can also see the fear underneath them. Despite all these warning signs, Henry continues moving forward. The lifestyle has become an addiction of its own. He is addicted to the money, the respect, the excitement, and the feeling of belonging to something powerful. Walking away would mean giving up everything he has spent years building. It would also mean admitting that the dream he chased as a child was not the perfect life he imagined. Then Henry's world takes another dangerous turn. The criminal activities around him become more aggressive, and the pressure between the gangsters begins increasing. Jimmy's ambitions are growing, Tommy's temper is becoming more difficult to control, and Henry is caught between his desire for money and his need to protect his family. The life that once seemed glamorous is beginning to reveal its true cost, and Henry is about to discover that in their world, success can be just as dangerous as failure. Henry Hill's world becomes increasingly dangerous as the criminal lifestyle he once considered exciting begins showing its darker side. For years, he has enjoyed the money, respect, and freedom that came with being connected to powerful criminals. But now, the risks are becoming impossible to ignore. The people around him are making bigger moves, taking greater chances, and attracting more attention from law enforcement. Henry still believes he can manage the situation, but the environment around him is becoming unpredictable. The same world that once made him feel powerful is slowly beginning to take control of his life. Jimmy Conway remains focused on making money, and his ambitions continue to grow. He has music, never been satisfied with smaller opportunities, and Henry understands that Jimmy is always thinking about the next major score. Jimmy's confidence is neither of the reasons Henry trusts him, but it is also what makes him dangerous. He believes he can outsmart almost any music, and he is willing to take serious risks when there is a large reward waiting at the end. Henry follows him because the money is too tempting to ignore, but he is starting to recognize that Jimmy's plans can create consequences that nobody can predict. Tommy DeVito becomes an even greater source of tension. His temper and unpredictable behavior make him difficult to control, and his desire for respect often pushes him into situations that could attract unwanted attention. Henry has known Tommy for years and understands his personality, but even he cannot always predict what Tommy will do next. Jimmy is also aware that Tommy can become a serious problem if music, his emotions take over. The friendship between the three men remains strong on the surface, yet underneath it there is a growing pressure that none of them can completely ignore. Henry continues making money through criminal operations and his success allows him to maintain the lifestyle he has built with Karen. Their home is comfortable and from the outside they appear to have everything they could want. But Henry's criminal activities are becoming harder to separate from his family life. He has to disappear unexpectedly, keep secrets, and constantly worry about whether someone is watching him. Karen notices his growing nervousness and begins asking more questions. But Henry does not want to reveal everything. He knows that the truth could destroy the life they have built together. The pressure eventually begins affecting Henry personally. He becomes more restless and suspicious, constantly thinking about who might be watching him and whether someone could betray him. The confidence that once made him feel untouchable begins weakening. He still acts like everything is under control when he is around his friends, but inside he knows that the situation is becoming more dangerous. The criminal world has taught him that people protect themselves first, and Henry begins wondering whether the same people he trusts would protect him if their own survival were at risk. At the same time, the authorities are becoming more determined to investigate the criminal activities surrounding Henry and his associates. Law enforcement, music, does not need to know every detail immediately. They only need enough evidence to start connecting people, businesses, money, music, and a suspicious activity. Henry understands that once the authorities begin building a case, his connections may not be enough to protect him. The idea of being arrested becomes more real, and for the first time, the life he once wanted so badly begins to feel like a trap. Henry's relationship with Karen becomes so increasingly complicated because she can sense that something is wrong. She sees the changes in his behavior and realizes that he's no longer the relaxed and confident man she first knew. Henry tries to hide his fear, but the pressure eventually affects the atmosphere at our home. Karen wants answers while Henry wants to protect his secrets. Their relationship is caught between love and mistrust, and neither of them knows how long the situation can continue. Despite everything, Henry continues returning to the people and activities that created his success. He knows the criminal world is dangerous, but he also knows that leaving it would not be simple. His connections, music, money, and the reputation are all tied to it. More importantly, he has spent years convincing music himself that this is who he is. The idea of becoming an ordinary person again feels almost too impossible. Jimmy's attitude remains different. While Henry is becoming more nervous, Jimmy seems determined to keep moving forward. He believes that the key to surviving is staying ahead of everyone else. His confidence makes Henry feel safer at times, but it also worries him because Jimmy is willing to take risks that Henry might not take music on his own. Henry begins realizing that even if he wants to slow down, Jimmy may continue pushing them deeper into danger. The situation becomes even more complicated when Henry realizes that the criminal world does not reward weakness. If someone appears frightened, others might take advantage of them. If someone becomes unreliable, people begin questioning their loyalty. Henry therefore tries to maintain his reputation even when he's scared. He continues acting confident, laughing with his friends, and behaving as though nothing can touch him. But privately, he knows that the situation is changing. The biggest problem is that Henry has too much to lose now. When he was younger, he could take risks because he had almost nothing. Now he has Karen, a home, money, and a reputation. Every criminal decision carries the possibility of destroying all of it. Yet instead of walking away, he continues taking chances because the lifestyle has become too deeply connected to his identity. Henry's choices begin creating a chain of problems that will eventually become impossible to escape. His friends are becoming more dangerous. The authorities are getting closer, and his family is beginning to see through his excuses. The criminal world is closing in from every direction, but Henry still believes he can find a way to survive. For now, he continues moving forward, but the balance between power and danger is beginning to disappear, and Henry Ice are about to enter the most unstable period of his life. Henry Hill's life becomes even more complicated as the pressure surrounding him continues to increase. The money is still coming in, the criminal connections are still strong, and from the outside, it appears that Henry has everything under control. But underneath that appearance, his world is becoming increasingly unstable. He has spent years believing that loyalty, connections, and reputation would protect him from serious consequences. Yet he is beginning to understand that those things can disappear very quickly when circumstances change. Henry has more responsibilities than ever before, and every decision now carries greater risks for both himself and his family. Henry continues moving between his criminal associates and his home life, trying to keep the two worlds separate. Karen has become increasingly aware that something is wrong. Even when Henry refuses to explain everything, she notices how often his mood changes and how quickly he becomes defensive whenever she asks questions. The confident man she once knew now seems constantly distracted, as if he is always thinking about something happening outside the house. Henry still tries to provide Karen with the comfortable lifestyle she has become accustomed to, but money can no longer hide the tension that is growing between them. Jimmy Conway, meanwhile, remains focused on opportunity. He is always thinking about how to make more money, and his ambition has become one of the most dangerous parts of his personality. Jimmy knows that the criminal world rewards people who are bold, but he also understands that anyone who becomes our liability can eventually become our problem. Henry has known Jimmy for years and respects his intelligence. Yet, he is beginning to realize that Jimmy's loyalty may depend on circumstances. As long as everyone is making money and staying useful, their friendship seems strong. But if the situation changes, Henry cannot be certain where Jimmy's priorities will lie. Tommy DeVito is becoming even more unpredictable. His temper, pride, and desire for recognition continue creating problems around him. Tommy wants to be respected by everyone, and he reacts badly whenever he believes someone is treating him as less important than he deserves. Henry understands that Tommy's personality makes him dangerous, but he also knows that Tommy has been part of their circle for a long time. The three men have shared too many experiences for Henry to simply walk away from their friendship. Still, every time Tommy loses his temper, Henry becomes more aware that one reckless action could put everyone at risk. The criminal world around Henry begins feeling less like the exciting adventure he once imagined and more like a constant game of survival. People are always watching one another. Rumors travel quickly, and nobody wants to be the person who knows too much while becoming unnecessary. Henry notices that some people who once appeared confident are becoming nervous. Others are changing their behavior and becoming more careful about who they trust. These small changes might not mean much individually, but together they create an atmosphere Henry cannot ignore. At the same time, Henry's criminal activities continue expanding. He is earning more money than ever. Due to the greater profits require greater involvement. More people become connected to his operations, and more secrets have to be protected. Henry begins realizing that every additional person creates an a possible weakness. If one person talks, gets arrested, or makes a mistake, the consequences can spread to everyone else. Yet Henry is already too deeply involved to simply step away. Karen sees the effects of this pressure at home. She wants Henry to tell her what is happening, but he continues giving her partial explanations. He tells her not to worry and insists that he can handle everything, but his behavior suggests otherwise. Karen is caught between trusting the man she loves and protecting herself from the dangers surrounding him. The more Henry hides, the harder it becomes for her to believe that everything is under control. Henry also begins recognizing that the people around him are not simply friends. They are criminals who have their own ambitions and fears. Everyone wants money, respect, and protection, but those goals do not always align. A person who is useful today might become a threat tomorrow. Henry has seen enough of the criminal world to understand this. Yet, He still wants to believe that the friendships he has built over the years are stronger than the pressures around them. Jimmy's behavior makes that belief harder to maintain. He becomes increasingly focused on protecting himself and maximizing his profits. Henry notices that Jimmy is thinking differently than he used to. The casual confidence that once made their friendship feel secure is being replaced by a colder attitude. Jimmy is becoming more careful about who knows what, and Henry begins wondering whether his friend is already thinking about how to protect himself if everything collapses. The pressure also affects Henry's relationship with Tommy. Henry still spends time with him, but there is a growing awareness that Tommy's impulsive behavior could eventually create a situation none of them can control. Tommy does not always understand why others are becoming cautious. He believes fear is a weakness and that showing aggression is the best way to maintain respect. Henry, however, is beginning to see that the real danger is not always the enemy standing in front of you. Sometimes the greatest danger is the friend who acts without thinking. As the tension grows, Henry finds himself looking back at the life he once dreamed about. When he was young, he saw the gangsters as men who had escaped ordinary limitations. They seemed rich, powerful, and free. Now that he is living their lifestyle, he sees something completely different. They are constantly worried about rivals, police investigations, money, and betrayal. They cannot simply relax and live normal lives because every decision has consequences. Henry realizes that the freedom he admired was never real. Still, he cannot bring himself to leave. The money is too important. The connections are too deep, and his entire identity has become connected to this world. Henry knows that walking away would not simply mean finding another job. It would mean abandoning the people, lifestyle, and a reputation that have shaped him for years. He is trapped by the very dream he once believed would make him free. Then another problem begins developing around Henry, making the situation even more dangerous. The authorities are getting closer, and Henry can no longer dismiss the possibility that his activities are being investigated. He becomes more cautious about where he goes and who he speaks with, but his nervousness itself begins making him more noticeable. Henry understands that the walls are slowly closing in. For the first time, the question is no longer whether his criminal lifestyle is dangerous. He knows it is. The real question is whether Henry can escape before the people around him, the authorities, or his own choices finally bring everything crashing down. Henry Hill's life is now moving toward a point where there is no easy way back. The excitement that once attracted him to the criminal world has been replaced by constant pressure. But he still refuses to let go of the lifestyle that made him feel powerful. He has spent too many years building his reputation, earning money, and becoming a part of the world around Jimmy Conway and Tommy DeVito. Every decision he makes now affects not only himself, but also Karen and the people closest to him. Henry begins realizing that the same connections that once protected him can also become the reason he is eventually caught. The atmosphere around Jimmy and the others becomes increasingly tense. Everyone understands that law enforcement is paying attention, and the possibility of arrests is no longer something they can simply laugh about. Jimmy remains focused on business, but his attitude has become colder and more calculating. He is thinking about survival and protecting what he has built. Henry notices these changes and starts wondering whether the loyalty between them is as strong as he believed. Their friendship was built during years of criminal activity, but Henry now understands that friendship in this world is always connected to money, power, and usefulness. Tommy continues behaving recklessly, unaware or unwilling to accept how dangerous their situation has become. His confidence makes him believe that he can handle anyone who challenges him. But Henry sees the consequences differently. Every unnecessary confrontation creates another person who might remember their names, another possible witness, and another reason for the authorities to pay attention. Henry starts becoming increasingly nervous around Tommy because he knows that a single impulsive decision could create problems for everyone. At home, Karen can feel Henry slipping further away. She has become accustomed to his strange schedule and unexplained activities, but the tension in his behavior is now impossible to ignore. Henry tries to maintain the appearance of a successful family man, but his criminal responsibilities continue interfering with his personal life. Karen wants stability, yet Henry's lifestyle makes stability almost too impossible. She begins to understand that the money and luxury surrounding them are connected to a dangerous world that could disappear at any moment. Henry's increasing anxiety also changes the way he sees his surroundings. Places that once made him feel comfortable now make him suspicious. He begins wondering who might be watching him, who might be talking to the authorities, and whether some owner within his own circle could eventually turn against him. He has spent years learning how criminals operate, but that knowledge now works against him, because he knows what people in this world are capable of. He can imagine every possible betrayal. The criminal lifestyle also begins affecting Henry's judgment. He has become accustomed to solving problems quickly and using his connections whenever something goes wrong. But the problems he faces now are becoming too large for simple solutions. Law enforcement cannot be intimidated like a rival on the street, and the consequences of an investigation cannot always be controlled through personal connections. Henry begins realizing that the rules he once believed he could avoid are finally catching up with him. Jimmy's increasing focus on protecting himself creates another layer of uncertainty. Henry remembers the years when Jimmy treated him almost like a trusted partner, but now their relationship feels different. Jimmy is still friendly, still involved, and still interested in making money, but Henry senses that something has changed. Jimmy is becoming more secretive, and Henry cannot help wondering what his friend might do if the situation becomes desperate. Meanwhile, Tommy's ambitions continue moving forward. He wants recognition and believes he deserves a higher position within the criminal organization. Henry understands why Tommy is excited about the possibility, but he also knows that Tommy's personality could become a serious problem. Tommy has always been impatient, and gaining more power could make him even less willing to listen to anyone. Henry begins to understand that the future of their group may depend on decisions being made by people who do not always think carefully about the consequences. Henry's own ambitions have also changed. When he was young, he wanted to become a gangster because he imagined it would give him complete freedom. Now he simply wants to keep what he has. The dream of becoming powerful has been replaced by the fear of losing everything. He wants to protect his family, his money, and his reputation. But the more he tries to protect them, the more dangerous his decisions become. Karen eventually reaches a point where she cannot simply accept Henry's explanations anymore. She has seen enough to understand that something serious is happening. Her trust in Henry is being tested, and she begins questioning whether the life they are living is worth the risks. Henry wants to reassure her, but he cannot promise safety because he knows he no longer controls the situation completely. The pressure reaches a new level when Henry realizes that his criminal activities are attracting more attention than before. He begins understanding that the authorities are not simply watching the people around him. They are getting closer to him personally. The possibility of arrest becomes more immediate, and Henry starts thinking about how he might protect himself if everything collapses. For years, Henry believed that knowing the right people was enough to keep him safe. Now he discovers that every connection can have two sides. The people who know his secrets can protect him, but they can also expose him. The more people know about his activities, the more vulnerable he becomes. His world has become a maze of relationships where trust is never guaranteed. Still, Henry continues moving forward because stopping feels even more dangerous than continuing. He cannot simply walk away from the money and the connections he has built. He also knows that leaving the criminal world could make him a target for people who fear what he knows. His choices have created a situation where every direction seems dangerous. As night falls, Henry looks at the life around him and begins realizing that the dream he once chased has become a prison. The expensive lifestyle is still there, but the excitement has been replaced by fear. The friendships are still present, but trust is weakening. The money continues coming in, but Henry can no longer enjoy it without thinking about what it might cost him. And somewhere beneath all the confidence, Henry begins to understand a truth he has spent years avoid. The criminal world does not allow people to leave whenever they want. Once you become part of it, escaping may be far more dangerous than entering it. Henry Hill has reached a point where the life he once dreamed about is becoming increasingly difficult to control. The money is still important, the connections are still there, and the criminal world still offers him opportunities that ordinary life never could. But Henry can no longer ignore the growing danger around him. Every day brings another reason to be nervous. The authorities are becoming more interested in the activities surrounding him, while the people Henry once trusted are becoming more focused on protecting themselves. He begins realizing that the greatest problem is no longer making money, it is surviving long enough to keep what he has. Henry's behavior becomes increasingly restless as the pressure builds. He spends more time worrying about what might happen next and less time enjoying the lifestyle that once made him feel powerful. He knows that law enforcement is getting closer, and he starts looking at ordinary situations differently. A familiar face in the wrong place can make him suspicious. A strange phone call can make him nervous. A friend acting differently can make him wonder whether someone has started talking. Henry has lived in a world where suspicion is normal, but now that suspicion has turned inward and he begins questioning almost everyone around him. Karen sees the change as well. She has spent years accepting Henry's unusual lifestyle because she loves him and because their money has provided them with a comfortable life. But now she realizes that comfort is not the same as security. Henry can buy expensive things, but he cannot buy certainty. He can use his connections to solve some problems, but he cannot control the actions of law enforcement. He can trust his friends, but he cannot guarantee that they will remain loyal when their own lives are threatened. Karen begins understanding that the world Henry built for them could disappear without warning. Henry continues working with Jimmy, but their relationship no longer feels as singly as it once did. Jimmy is still ambitious, music, and still focused on money. But Henry notices that he is becoming increasingly careful about what he says and who he trusts. Jimmy understands the danger of the situation and his instinct is to protect himself first. Henry cannot blame him for that because everyone in their world thinks the same way, but it still makes him uncomfortable. Their friendship was once based on a shared ambition and trust. Yet Henry now wonders how much of that trust would remain if they were both facing serious consequences. Tommy's position also becomes more complicated. His unpredictable personality has always made him dangerous, but now the stake is higher than ever. In a world where law enforcement is watching more carefully, reckless behavior can create consequences that cannot be easily repaired. Henry begins seeing the difference between Tommy's idea of power and the reality of survival. Tommy wants respect and recognition, while Henry increasingly wants to avoid attention. Their priorities are moving in different directions, creating tension that becomes harder to ignore. The criminal world around them continues operating, but it no longer feels like the glamorous organization Henry once imagined. Behind closed doors, people are worried about investigations, money, and betrayal. Everyone wants to appear confident, but Henry can see fear beneath the surface. The men who once laughed together and celebrated their success now have more reasons to watch each other carefully. The rules remain the same: loyalty, silence, and respect. But Henry is beginning to understand that those rules are strongest only when everyone believes they are safe. Henry's own choices begin catching up with him. He has spent years taking risks because every successful operation made the next one seem easier. But criminal activity has a way of creating consequences that arrive long after the money has been spent. The more involved Henry becomes, the more evidence and connections exist around him. Even if he believes he can't hide one mistake, he cannot erase everything that has happened over the years. The authorities only need enough information to connect the right people, and Henry realizes that his name might already be part of the chain. His family becomes the one thing he desperately wants to protect. Henry can't accept danger for himself, but he does not want Karen or the people close to him dragged into the consequences of his choices. Yet, he has already brought the danger home. Karen knows too much. She has seen too much, and she understands enough about Henry's world to realize that their safety depends on decisions she cannot control. Henry's attempts to protect her sometimes make things worse because his secrecy creates more uncertainty between them. As Henry's anxiety increases, his judgment begins to suffer. He becomes impatient and starts making decisions without thinking through every consequence. The confident criminal who once seemed capable of handling anything is now reacting to pressure instead of controlling it. His world is moving too quickly for him to keep every piece in a place. The money, the relationships, the family, and the criminal operations area all pulling him in different directions. Then Henry begins facing an even greater problem, the possibility that the authorities may finally have enough to act. For years, he believed he could remain one step ahead. He knew how to avoid attention, how to keep secrets, and how to rely on his connections. But now those protections are becoming weaker. The people around him are being watched. His activities are becoming harder to hide and his own nervous behavior is making everything more difficult. Henry starts thinking about the future in a way he never did before. He remembers the young boy who once looked at gangsters and believed they were living the perfect life. To that boy, the money and respect seemed like freedom. But the man Henry has become now understands the truth. He cannot live normally, cannot trust everyone around him and cannot simply decide to leave. His entire life has been built around a world that survives through secrecy and fear. The realization is painful because Henry still wants the things that life entirely gave him. He wants the money, the comfort, and the feeling of importance. But he also wants safety. And he is beginning to understand that he cannot have both forever. Karen watches him carefully as his behavior becomes more desperate. She knows something major is coming, even if Henry refuses to explain it. Their relationship has survived secrets, arguments, and the strange reality of Henry's lifestyle. But now they are facing a situation neither of them can easily escape. Henry's world is finally closing in. The people who once made him feel untouchable can no longer guarantee his safety. The money that once represented freedom now feels like evidence of everything he has done, and the friendships that once gave him confidence are becoming uncertain. For the first time, Henry realizes that surviving may require him to make the most difficult decision of his life. He may have to choose between protecting the criminal world he helped build and protecting himself and his family. And once that choice arrives, there may be no way to undo it. Henry Hill's situation finally reaches a dangerous turning point. The life that once seemed completely under his control is now collapsing around him, and the pressure from law enforcement becomes impossibly to ignore. Henry knows that his criminal activities have created too many connections and too many risks to remain hidden forever. He is no longer thinking about becoming richer or more powerful. His main concern is survival. Every decision now has to be made carefully because one mistake could put his freedom, his family, and everything he has built at risk. Karen can see how badly the pressure is affecting Henry. Their home, which once represented comfort and success, has become a place filled with tension. Henry is constantly distracted, and Karen knows that something serious is happening. She has spent years accepting his dangerous lifestyle, but now she understands that the consequences are finally reaching them. Henry wants to protect her, yet his inability to explain the truth only makes the situation more frightening. At the same time, Henry's relationship with Jimmy becomes increasingly complicated. Jimmy is still focused on protecting himself and the money around him. Henry realizes that the rules of their world have changed. Loyalty is no longer something he can simply assume. When people become frightened, they begin thinking about their own survival first. Henry knows that if the authorities get enough evidence, everyone involved will be forced to make difficult choices. Henry also understands that Tommy's unpredictable behavior has contributed to the dangerous atmosphere surrounding them. The criminal world they are treated almost like a private club has become a place where every mistake can have serious consequences. Henry begins looking at his old friends differently. The people who once made him feel powerful now remind him of how vulnerable he has become. As the investigation closes in, Henry faces the reality that his old connections may not be enough to save him. He has spent years believing that there would always be someone capable of fixing his problems, but now the situation is too serious. The authorities are not simply another rival that can be intimidated or negotiated with. Henry has to think about what will happen if he loses his freedom and what choices he will have left. For the first time, Henry begins seriously considering the possibility of cooperating with the authorities. It is an enormous decision because his entire life has been based on silence and loyalty. Turning against the people he once called friends could make him a target, but refusing to cooperate could leave him facing the full consequences of his criminal activities. Henry knows that either choice will change his life forever. Karen is forced to confront the same reality. Whatever happens to Henry will affect her and their family as well. The luxurious lifestyle they enjoyed no longer matters as much as staying safe. The money that once seemed like proof of Henry's success now feels like a reminder of the dangers surrounding them. Their priorities have completely changed. Henry eventually realizes that the life he spent years building cannot be saved in its older form. The friendships, money, a reputation, and criminal connections that once gave him confidence have become liabilities. He understands that survival may require him to abandon the very world that once made him feel important. The decision is painful, but Henry knows there is no easy way back. His childhood dream has reached its final stage, and the glamorous image he once admired has disappeared completely. Now Henry must choose what matters more: loyalty to a criminal world that is already falling apart, or a chance to protect himself and the people closest to him. Henry Hill finally reaches the point where the criminal life he once loved can no longer protect him. The money, the connections, and the reputation that once made him feel untouchable have become sources of fear. With the authorities closing in and the people around him becoming less trustworthy, Henry realizes that his future depends on a decision he never imagined making. He has spent his entire life believing that loyalty to the criminal world was everything, but now he has to decide whether that loyalty is worth risking his freedom and his family's safety. Henry understands that cooperating with the authorities could make him an enemy to the people he once called friends. Jimmy has always valued loyalty and silence, and Henry knows that breaking those rules could have serious consequences. But Henry also knows that continuing to protect the old life may leave him with nothing. His relationship with Karen has already been damaged by years of secrecy and fear, and he does not want to lose the only people who still matter to him because of a criminal world that is slowly collapsing. The decision becomes even more difficult because Henry remembers everything he experienced with Jimmy and Tommy. They were not strangers who appeared in his life for a shorter time. They were people he trusted, worked with, and shared countless experiences with. Henry had believed that they would always remain together no matter what happened. Now he understands that the criminal world does not work that way. When survival is at stake, friendship can become secondary. Henry finally chooses to protect himself and his family. He begins providing information to the authorities about the criminal operations and the people involved. It is a complete reversal of the life he has lived for so many years. The man who once believed silence was the most important rule is now forced to speak. Every piece of information he gives increases his chances of escaping the consequences, but it also makes his former associates more dangerous to him. Karen is caught in the middle of this transformation. She understands why music Henry made his decision, but she also knows that they can no longer return to the life they once had. Their old friends are now potential enemies, and the lifestyle that once surrounded them with money and luxury has disappeared. Henry has chosen survival, but survival comes with a price. As the authorities begin building their case, Henry's old world starts collapsing. The people who once appeared powerful now face serious consequences. The criminal network that seemed almost impossible to challenge begins losing its strength as arrests, investigations, and betrayals to expose what was happening beneath the surface. Henry watches the world he once admired fall apart piece by piece. He also realizes how different his life has become. There was a time when Henry believed that becoming a gangster would make him free. Now he is preparing to leave behind everything connected to that identity. He can no longer return to the streets, the restaurants, or the social circles where he once felt important. The lifestyle that once gave Henry confidence has now become something he desperately needs to escape. Henry and Karen prepare to start a new life under protection. The future is uncertain, and Henry knows he cannot simply erase his past. He has spent years building relationships, making enemies, and creating a reputation, and those memories will follow him wherever he goes. Still, he He understands that a difficult new beginning is better than continuing down a path that has already destroyed so much. For Henry, this is the final realization of what his choices have cost him. He gained money, excitement, and status, but he lost the sense of security he once took for granted. He wanted to live like a powerful gangster, yet in the end, the criminal world left him afraid of almost everyone around him. As Henry prepares to leave his old life behind, he looks back at the person he once was. The young boy who admired gangsters believed they were living the perfect life. He could never have imagined that the same lifestyle would eventually force him to run from the very people he once trusted. Now, there is only one thing left to do. Leave everything behind and try to survive the consequences of the life he chose. Henry Hill's journey finally reaches its bitter conclusion. After spending years chasing money, power, respect, and the glamorous lifestyle of organized crime, Henry has reached a point where almost everything he once valued has disappeared. The criminal world that once made him feel important has become nothing more than a memory, and the people who once surrounded him are no longer part of his everyday life. Henry makes the decision to cooperate with the authorities, knowing there is no way to return to his old life. For him, survival now means accepting that the dream he spent his entire life chasing was never what he believed it was. Under the protection of the authorities, Henry and Karen leave their old world behind and are forced to begin again somewhere far away from the people and places that shaped their lives. Henry knows his decision to cooperate has consequences, but he also understands that continuing his old lifestyle would eventually destroy everything. The luxurious restaurants, expensive clothes, parties, and endless money are gone. In their place is an uncertain future, where Henry must live with the knowledge that he can never safely return to the life he once considered his greatest achievement. Looking back, Henry remembers why he entered the criminal world in the first place. As a child, he watched gangsters with admiration. They seemed powerful, respected, and free. While ordinary people appeared trapped in boring routines, Henry believed that becoming a gangster would give him everything he wanted. He never imagined that the same lifestyle would eventually make him fear the people closest to him and force him to abandon everything he had built. His relationship with Karen also changes because of everything they have experienced. Their marriage has survived a world filled with secrecy, danger, and uncertainty, but they can no longer pretend that their old lifestyle was sustainable. Karen has witnessed both the excitement and luxury, as well as the fear and instability hidden behind it. Now, they must accept a simpler and far more uncertain existence. Whatever happens next, they know their past cannot simply be recreated. Henry's memories of Jimmy and Tommy remain complicated. They were once his closest friends and partners, and he shared some of the most important years of his life with them. But the criminal world eventually revealed how fragile those friendships truly were. Trust existed only as long as everyone believed they could benefit from one another. Once survival became the priority, loyalty became much harder to maintain. Henry's decision to cooperate may have destroyed his relationships with them, but by that point, he understood that protecting himself and his family mattered more. The collapse of Henry's criminal world also reveals the central lesson of his story. The lifestyle appeared glamorous because Henry focused on the rewards. He noticed the money, respect, special treatment, and excitement, but he failed to understand the price behind those rewards. Every criminal success created another risk. Every friendship carried the possibility of betrayal. Every dollar earned through illegal activity created another reason for the authorities to investigate him. In the end, Henry does not become the powerful gangster he once imagined he would be. Instead, he becomes a man who has lost the identity he spent years creating. He is alive, but he has been separated from the world that once defined him. The irony is impossible to ignore. Henry entered organized crime because he wanted freedom from ordinary life. Eventually, he had to give up that entire lifestyle simply to survive. His story also shows how quickly power can disappear. Jimmy and the other criminals once seemed untouchable. They controlled businesses, influenced people, and moved through their neighborhoods with confidence. But once law enforcement began putting the pieces together, that power proved temporary. Arrests, investigations, and betrayal weakened the world they had built. The people who once seemed to control everything eventually discovered that they were not above the consequences of their actions. Henry's final situation is therefore completely different from the fantasy he once imagined. He no longer has the excitement of the streets or the respect of the criminal world. Instead, He must live with the consequences of his choices and accept that his old identity is gone. Yet there is also a strange kind of freedom in leaving that world behind. For the first time, Henry is no longer constantly worried about rivals, police investigations, criminal associates, or the possibility of betrayal. His story becomes a powerful warning about the difference between appearance and reality. What once looked like a glamorous life of freedom and power ultimately became a life ruled by fear, uncertainty, and survival. From the outside, the gangster lifestyle can seem exciting and glamorous, especially when people focus only on the money, power, and influence. But Henry's experience exposes the fear, instability, and destruction hidden behind that image. What begins as a dream of becoming important slowly turns into a desperate struggle to survive. Looking back, Henry realizes that his biggest mistake was believing the criminal world could provide permanent security. It could give him money for a while. It could give him status for a while. It could even make people fear him. But none of those things could guarantee him a peaceful future. Eventually, the consequences caught up with him. Henry's journey ultimately ends with him living an ordinary life, the very kind of life he once considered beneath him. The irony is that, after everything he has experienced, ordinary life may be the safest thing he could have asked for. He may no longer have the wealth, excitement, or influence of his gangster years, but he also no longer has to live by the rules of a dangerous criminal world. The boy who once dreamed of becoming a gangster finally learns the truth about the life he admired. It was never true freedom. It was a trap disguised as a dream. That is what makes Henry Hill's story so powerful. He didn't simply lose a criminal empire, he lost an entire identity and had to learn how to live without it. His rise gave him everything he thought he wanted, while his fall showed him the true cost of those desires. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this movie recap, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing movie breakdowns. See you in the next one.